All right, guys, we're gonna do this tutorial as quick as possible because of the nobody wants to watch 2 hours of me blending, right? So these guys take about 3 hours start to finish, I'd say, to get to here for me. And I think I'm a pretty slow painter, and I think I enjoy the process quite a bit, so I'm not really in a hurry with this. But a few of you guys asked to see a video of how I kind of blend this all together to get these guys to where they are. And it's not super complicated, it is just a little bit time consuming, I guess. So what I did was I started with a white primer that I got off of, like, I bought it at Home Depot. It's one of these cheapo primers, and going back, I wouldn't do it the same way again because this primer almost became hydrophobic. So I've actually dry brushed a light layer of the primary color of this guy, which is Panzer Aces. The number is 344, I think it is. And at the end of this video, I'm gonna link like all the paints I've used, just so you guys, if you want to follow along, like literally step by step, we can do that. But this is the primary color. It's kind of like a soft mixing white. And to me, this is the prettiest color for the Stormtroopers because a stark, like just full blast plain white is just too much. And this gives you this option to throw a little bit of extra highlight with a pure white at the very end. And I'm gonna show you guys that too. But so this right here, Panzer Aces, I think it's like German winter wash or some shit. German winter, whatever. So we'll get to that at the end again. Now, this guy right here to me is number one, right? So this is Vallejo Model color, and it's just straight up there black, and it's 7950. This guy is the best black to paint miniatures with, bar none, in my opinion. I've painted with a lot of different colors, and this guy dries, it has a really pretty, like, flat finish to it. There's not a whole lot of sheen, if any sheen at all. And a lot of guys, a lot of really professional, really good modelers, painters are using this particular brand of black because it does produce such a pretty black. It does produce such a nice effect. And Vader just, whatever. Okay, so who cares, right? So let's get into it. So I use a Winsor & Newton Series 7, size 1. I use that for basically the entire miniature. And what I'm doing here is, to give you guys an idea, I block in the black, and you can see how sloppy that is. And then I block in the shading, again, very sloppy. And it's fine. I'll show you here. I'm gonna start with this guy, and we're gonna go, and what I'll do is I'll paint the helmet, and then you guys can apply that technique to everything, right? So I have a wet palette, and I think that's essential for this technique. You can see here it's shiny because of the moisture. So there's the Vallejo black, and then on the other end of the spectrum here is the whites, right? And somewhere in the middle they meet and they produce various shades of white or gray. So I drip about 2 or 3 drops of this, of the white in one corner, and 2 or 3 drops of the black in the other corner. And then I go to town. So the mixing ratio for this, and I apologize here because my camera setup is really rudimentary. I'm using my iPhone right now on a soda bottle, and that's it, right? So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start off with a pretty dark mix of the white and the black, wet blended together on the palette. And again, this is after a rattle can spray primer and a light dry brush. And the reason for the dry brush is, one, it's gonna highlight the raised areas and the textures and whatnot that we are eventually going to bring up to the brightest highlight. And then 2, because of that primer becoming essentially hydrophobic, now I have something where the paints and the washes and stuff can actually stick to. My method is pretty sporadic. Basically how whenever my brain thinks of, let me add a wash here, let me do a blend here, I just go for it. I don't really have this meticulous process, which I think in part is the reason why it takes so long for me to do this stuff, right? So let's see, right there I think is about where we're at. So I'm gonna add some color here to it, and then we're just gonna go from there. And I don't know if you can see in the video, but this is still having a hard time catching paint. So This is almost like well, it is a gray, and I'm putting the gray. And everything's very thin, very, very thin. Very thin coats, almost translucent. The ratio of paint to water here is probably 1 part paint to 8 or 10 parts water. So it's very, almost translucent. It's very light, very thin coat. And that's definitely what you want here, right? So I'm just blending in. Let's get some coverage here. As you guys can see here, I'm not particularly neat with this at all, and the reason for that is twofold. One, who cares? Number two, there are a lot of like hard to reach spots, and some guys I think paint these guys disassembled in subcomponents, which I think is fine. But at the same time, I'm trying to get this crap done so that we can never play a game here with painted miniatures, and you know, I'd rather not be 80 years old by the time I'm done with that. So I just assembled them, hit them with a primer. And at least right there, you can start playing games with Stormtroopers being white, you know, and I primed the Rebels in a different color, and at least there's something going on the table. But, I don't know, I like painting, I like playing with beautiful painted armies and all that, so that's probably why I haven't really painted, or I'm sorry, I haven't really played since, like, Warhammer 2nd edition back in, like, the 90s, which is pathetic, but anyways, so let's talk a little bit about the shading. So for the shading, don't use just black and white, or at least not to get where I'm at, right? So I use a Citadel color called Macragge Blue, which is like the Ultramarines color. And I just throw a little bit of that on the palette in another corner. And then for the blend, for the wash, or whatever you want to call it, for the shading, I throw a little bit of that mixture that I've made already, the gray. I throw that into a little bit of the blue, add a little black to it, and I end up with this like kind of dark bluish, grayish, sea gray tone almost. And I think that looks pretty nice. And I'm just gonna throw that in like that. I'm gonna throw it in like that. Now dude, this looks crazy, right? Because you're gonna be like, what is this guy doing? You're just blocking in all these colors and shades. And I'm sure there are guys out there that are watching this that say, hey, you could be a lot neater and probably save time. And you know what? You're probably right. But this is how I'm doing it. So there we go. And right there looks about right. I'll throw a little bit of a black on there. I'm trying to do this kind of quick too, because I don't want this video to be an hour long. I just want you guys to see the general technique here. And by the time I'm done, I'm not even sure this is going to be worth uploading, because I'm not going to watch the camera. I'm just looking at the miniature. So hopefully I'm in the right spot and this is somewhat in focus. Cool. All right, so we're what, 10 minutes in already? This is nuts. We're 10 minutes in. This is where we're at. We're starting to have a miniature that kind of looks like a Stormtrooper, I guess. Let's fill this in right here. Like that. And if you look at reference material for the Stormtroopers, you'll see that a lot of their, like, I don't know, what do you want to call this? Markings on their helmet, whatever, they are actually not black or gray. They're these weird shades of blue. So I'm adding that because it looks pretty too on the miniature, I think. And I know if you guys have like the old school Dawn Post replica helmets and stuff that I had when I was a kid, all those stickers were like this bluish stuff, and they, you know, well, anyways, it's rambling at this point like a crazy person. So here's that. So there you go. So if you're looking at this right now, you're like, holy crap, this guy does not know how to paint at all. Maybe, but I'm gonna start tricking this out, and I'm gonna start prettying this up, and you're gonna see the difference. So I'm doing the mix again of grays or a mix of white and black, turning it into various shades of gray. And here we go, check this out. It's all very, very thin. And it's going to be in multiple coats. I think in part, what's charming about these guys is that as you're building up these layers, you definitely don't want to be perfect. It's almost like pointillism if you guys are classically trained painters. So you're doing almost these like little dots, right? Or just very small, gentle dabs with your brush. And I'm not looking for perfect coverage. What I'm looking for is basically wet blending on the miniature. So I'm not really cleaning my brush off between shifting and tones. I'm working on my wet palette, and I'm applying that wetness directly to the miniature, and I'm blending it on the actual figure, and then actually you'll get a feel for it. And if you've been painting for a little bit and you kind of know your brush and stuff, you kind of know what you can get away with. But you see how it kind of grows right there? And all I'm doing is I'm just literally dabbing my brush in different spots on the miniature based on how much paint and what kind of tone I had on the brush, if that makes sense. And when I do this, I don't mind if I build up almost like a little texture from the paint, because what I'll do is I'll come over it again with a dampened brush with almost no paint on it, and I'll kind of smooth that out, and it'll aid me in blending, almost like glazing a little bit. Hitting it with a little bit of darkness there. And yeah, I do listen to this weird, like, lofty elevator music when I paint, which is goofy, but I kind of like it.
Together on that island. His voice always used to be there, and now it's gone. I can't think of his face or his name. I feel lost.
And you see here that being a little, well, not being very neat in the beginning doesn't really matter, because this actually does have pretty decent coverage. And these grays, since you're painting in these translucent, you see here how like the translucency of the paint, if you're painting it like this, all that stuff kind of helps out to give you that overall look at the end. Because I'm trying to avoid having this very stark contrast on these guys. I want soft and gentle. Because if you look at like the movies, right? If you look at Stormtroopers, their armor is what, ceramite or whatever they call it. I don't know. That's Warhammer, but it's a plastic. The prop designers, the prop team for the original movies, they made vacuum formed molds, and they vacuum formed a bunch of costumes, and it's all plastic, right? And it's super shiny, and it doesn't pick up any dirt, whatever. And even on Endor, dudes aren't very dirty, except like the Scout Troopers. If you look at again, if you use the movies as reference, which is what I do for authenticity here from my guys, you'll notice that like the Scout Troopers, their pouches are slightly stained and dirty, whatever. But like the Stormtroopers on Endor are just as clean as they were on the Death Star. And I think that the reason for that is, one, that's how they roll, and then two, that material doesn't really pick up a whole lot of grime, it looks like. So I'm going with that look for my guys. So what the point of that rambling is, if you paint the way I do here with these like wet blends, and you allow for shading to happen just in the paint instead of like deep washes or heavy washes on the battlefield, or when you're displaying these guys, you know, because you're most likely a full-grown man, you know, a human being, and these guys are what, 28 or 32 millimeters from a normal viewing distance of, say, you know, 6 inches or whatever, if you're looking at them kind of close. That blending, those different shades in the armor will just present themselves nicely, and the model will kind of pop in the light spots and whatever. I think some guys might just want to mute this video and just watch me actually paint, because I'm rambling a little bit. I don't really know what to say. Usually I'm super quiet when I'm painting. Just listen to my stupid music and go from there. All right, so if you're watching this, I'm doing the light source basically when I paint, coming from the top left, right, or top right, depending on how you look at it, but down like this. So I'm gonna put all my highlights on this side of the trooper's helmet, and on his armor, everything is gonna be basically reflecting that way, and that gives you like a natural look, I think, versus trying to put that stuff everywhere. If you look, that side of this helmet is a little brighter than that side. Not by super much, but just enough to where you can tell that, all right, there's a light source coming from here and not from everywhere simultaneously. And I think that looks pretty, it's attractive. And you see here how it's starting to shape up pretty quickly, actually. We're only 20 minutes in, Jesus. All right. I'm gonna hit turbo mode here and see if I can actually produce this quicker than 30 minutes. To take away from this video is, the paints matter. The Vallejo paints I'm using are really nice. That soft white from the Panzer Exos line is a really nice white for the Stormtroopers in my opinion. And that black, that Vallejo black is awesome. And then just wet blending, just kind of working on it. So if you look at this side, let's pump this guy out. All right, so I'm gonna throw a little bit of a wash, if you will, onto the mouth. And all I'm doing is I'm using the Vallejo black, and on the wet palette, I just have a little spot where I've pooled a little bit more water, and I'm gonna blend that just with a tiny bit of blue. And I'm gonna have this grayish blue, and I'm just gonna throw that in here real quick. Jesus Christ. Like that. And that was too stark. I have to say it's really hard to paint. I've never really done this before where I'm videotaping it. So I'm trying to hold the model still so it stays in focus. And at the same time, paint the way I normally do. It's hard. All right, that looks pretty good. And then back to wet blending. And kind of fixing wherever messed up a little bit, if you will. we're getting there. And at least for me, I do this whenever I have time alone, so I can kind of really focus on this and not have to worry about anything else. I think my wives are out shopping right now, so they're not going to bother me. All right, we're getting there. When you're doing this, focus on the head. And actually, I a lot of times I paint the face or the head of my miniatures first, because a nice look on that kind of motivates me to keep going for the rest of the figure. And that's, you know, the first place people are gonna look are the faces or heads. So if that looks really nice, the rest of the miniature will be almost like instantly validated, you know? Which is what it's all about. we're at 33 minutes. I'm going to wrap this up in the next couple minutes. You can see I'm wet blending directly on the dude's head right here. the light being focused on this part right here. And then just slightly darker on this side of the helmet. And again, it's just wet blended together, so you have really smooth, pretty transitions between the two. And it's just practice, man. Just kind of work on it. There we go. And just let it build up over time. Don't try and just coat this dude in 1 or 2 layers and then call it done, because it just won't look the same. At least not, it won't look the way my guys look. My guys, the reason for this particular look is because of the wet blending, and just like literally it's multiple really thin coats with some translucency between coats, and that's why they have this particular look. Which, if you've hung in for 40 minutes, I guess this is what you're going for. You're going for this look. You want to see how I do this. Well, there you go. That's pretty much how I do it. And I'm gonna refine the crap out of this, but you guys get the idea. Looks about right. Again, here's the palette. Just guys, give you guys an idea of what it looks like when I'm doing this. So, light, dark shades over here. I'm grabbing paint from this end, throwing it in the middle, and then with what I have, you see I end up with this grayish, and then I can throw some white, and I'll end up with a different shade. So, a wet palette and being able to have like thin wet paints is the way to go for this technique. All right, guys, if you hung in for this long, thanks. That's cool. Later.